everyone, this is Eric from IONCINEMA.com, giving you another episode of IndieSponge with
Kevin Jagernauth. Glad to be here.
Kevin. The Oscar telecast is potentially in peril. We're in trouble. There's some, nothing's official yet, but there's some murmurs. There's people that are getting together and sort of like looking at what the 2021 telecast might look like. I was hoping that we could look at different scenarios instead of like creating or thinking of dread. So what do you think would happen if we do stick a flagpole in and do stay firm on a February 28th date?
It's so strange to think of even the Oscar season. It's hard to think of what'll happen next week. So if they do keep the February broadcast, I think there's a lot of questions around how these films get seen by voters, by critics. The whole landscape of how the award season is done is going to change. So I think maybe part of the reason they're looking at postponing a bit is to give a bit more time for maybe films to get seen, for the sort of publicity campaign that usually surrounds these films to have this space to adjust. I mean, what do you think about the award show moving? Like, if it moves, where does it go?
Well, I think I was always afraid of the state of how it might affect the smaller films, the more art house theater stuff, the stuff that we find at the Indie Spirit Awards. So I was always thinking about how they might try to position themselves. They're not going to try to insert themselves in the calendar if they can't make their money back. So I'm always thinking about those guys. But then with concerns to the dates, then I'm thinking as another scenario, perhaps they might just postpone it and push it towards May and try to see how they can potentially find coin in different quarters as different strategies with this COVID nonsense gets put into place.
But then I think the other, for me, like, if you push the awards to May, at what point does it even make sense to have them? Because you're basically in the middle of 2021 by that point. So that's one element for me is, if you're thinking of pushing this show that far along, maybe you're just at a point where you just face reality and kibosh it, which no one wants to really do, but it's a reality we have to face, I think.
So I think in a given year, there's about 500 to 600 titles that are submitted for consideration. If this year we get 1/4 of that, and you pair that with what might play out next year, then perhaps what you're saying makes a lot of sense, is cancel and then sort of package 2021 with 22.
Yep, but there's a lot of people who say that maybe that will be too much or whatnot. So give out 2 Best Picture awards. I think like anything else right now, I think everyone's just waiting to see what even the return to cinemas look like, particularly in the States where everything's uncertain right now.
An expanded Best Picture category. I'm up for that. 15 titles. On to our next topic. This week there's a project that Yorgos Lanthimos is on board, and it's moving along at a really positive pace. He's been attached to a couple of projects as of late, but this one seems to be taking the lead. So I'll go more into the deets. So New Regency, who has a colorful history in film production, are getting more auteur-like. They produced The Revenant, 12 Years a Slave, Birdman, The Lighthouse as of late. And so they picked up the property in 2019. Yorgos attaches himself as director in December. And this week it's announced that his writing partner, or rather the writer on The Favorite, will be penning the project. So I'm talking about the Hawkline monster. And I'm actually quite enthused about this project because it goes in a direction that can expand on the tool set and voice of this one of our more cherished auteurs. So let's talk a little bit about the Hawkline monster.
Sure. I mean, it seems to be material that it feels a little more Guillermo del Toro than Yorgos, which is probably why it's that exciting. But it should be said that, you know, even while this film has Tony McNamara now adapting the book by Richard Brodigan, Yorgos Lanthimos has a few other projects in the past year that have earned his attention, including Pop 1280 and The Man in the Rockefeller Suit over at Fox Searchlight. So he's got a few irons in the fire. My feeling is that, like any director, he's going to see which one manages to get through all the hurdles it takes to get a movie into production.
So there's definitely a linkage here between this, perhaps, and the Pop 1280 or 1208 novel. It does take place in a Western-like setting, whereas that one was. I read the book. It's much more like a sheriff. It's more smaller in scope. This one was proposed originally to Hale Ashby as a spaghetti western, and it's featuring things like rather sci-fi or I'll say occult type activity, and a lot of random sex and some cool lead characters. So we might be seeing dual protagonists, gunslingers in this film. Do you think Colin Farrell is somebody that we might see here? Could we be seeing him re-team for a third time?
Sure. I mean, yeah. I mean, I haven't read the book or anything, but Colin Farrell in Gothic Western. I mean, so I'd be the first in line to see it. But honestly, Yorgos Lanthimos doing a Western at all is pretty exciting. So, especially one that seems to have a bit of a Gothic or fantasy feel. So, yeah, it's going to be new territory, and it'll be interesting to see what he does with it.
Some original names that were attached way back when were Jack Nicholson, Dustin Hoffman, and Clint Eastwood. So it's gone the gamut in terms of A-listers. Yeah, I'm particularly enthused about this, and it's also an author that sort of like has his own cult following in a way, and yeah, we'll be checking out to see how this first true adaptation might pan out. Let's move on to the next topic. So this week, Jeremiah Zagar, who broke out big at Sundance in the next section with the micro-budgeted We the Animals, and who's done actually some doc work just prior to that with Captivated: The Trials of Pamela Smart. He comes from a docu world. He comes from a short film world. We the Animals is a film that is about a small nucleus, a small family, and sort of like dealing with children breaking out of the confines of an almost imprisoned home-like situation. And he's jumping on board a huge project with Netflix and a huge actor. So let's yeah. What has that association been like so far?
So yeah, he'll be directing Adam Sandler in Netflix's Hustle, which is a basketball story about a scout who I guess looks to redeem himself by scouting a player overseas and trying to bring him to the NBA. So it's a big level up for Jeremiah Zagar, and again, it's an interesting choice by Adam Sandler. I mean, the project is at Netflix, where he's brought the Merowitz stories with Noah Baumbach and Uncut Gems with the Safdies. So it's pretty interesting to see that Adam Sandler, who puts his more mainstream fare on Netflix, also using his clout to work with auteurs and bringing them there as well. So it's an interesting project, one to certainly keep an eye on.
Yeah, certainly Uncut Gems was a big mold-changing, game-changing moment for him. I'm looking at this project and I'm thinking of like the multicultural aspect lens of The Farewell. So I'm encouraged by that, and I can imagine them going to the Balkans or something. So there might be some comedic value there, but we could even find some like redeeming territory and like dramatic terrain as well. So we'll end up seeing how this pans out. The one part of the scribe team is Will Fetters, and he, I believe, wrote A Star Is Born and some more popular romantic fare. And he was recently attached to a Hollywood adaptation of Tell No One. So, what can we say about the text?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting screenwriter on the project. As you mentioned, he did A Star Is Born, but he also did The Lucky One, The Best of Me, Remember Me, these sort of like tween-age melodrama soap things. So it'll be interesting. It's clearly, if he follows his track, it's going to be another story that sort of has that really sort of raw emotional element. Honestly, when I read about this project, the first thing that clicked into my mind was The Way Back, the recent Ben Affleck film. So yeah, that clicked into my head, but who knows where this will go, and particularly with Zagar at the helm, he'll probably bring his own sort of stamp to it.
Yeah, we're definitely hoping for some creative freedom and something that's smaller in scale and will allow for Adam to be seen in a different light once again. On to our next piece. So again, sometimes the trades don't pick up on news items that come from outside certain film nations, and so we got tidbits piece of news of what Park Chan-Wook's working on, and if we look at his career as he's done. He had all the Vengeance films, and he did all this work to then have a leg up into going into the Hollywood system. And he sort of like went there and then went back home and then did like a more precise piece with Handmaiden, and then he did a series. So he's very much in a mode where he's doing a lot of stuff. And so this week we got a little bit of news on what he might actually do next.
Yeah, so he is writing a script. He didn't give much detail, but the word is that it's going to be a Korean project, one that will bring him into sort of more melodramatic territory.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it just speaks to, you're right. I mean, his career over the past 5-10 years, he's sort of chased. He's gone down the directions he's wanted to go in. So he came to Hollywood, made a super weird, very Park Chan-Wook film with Stoker, which either you loved it or you didn't connect with it, but it was uniquely his. And then he went back to The Handmaiden, which I thought was wonderful and was just his own distinct voice, and then put his stamp on an American miniseries. So for him to step into melodrama territory, it's exciting. I don't think he's really done that, but again, like knowing this filmmaker, he's going to have a whole angle up his sleeve that we don't know about.
Oh, that's for sure. So production is set for the fall. That's what we do know. And we do know who the co-leads will be. They're rather young. You have Park Hae-il and Tang Wei. And Tang Wei is somebody who's sort of like, her career began with a bang with Lust Caution. Mm-hmm. I believe that played at TIFF and at Venice, if I'm not mistaken. And she broke out big in a rather exceptional film called Long Day's Journey into the Night. What do you think about those co-leads? And do you imagine them in any vigilante or vengeance-like mode?
I mean, who knows where the story will go? I think both actors are gonna have whatever it turns out to be. They're gonna have something really rich to work with, really interesting and complex to work with. But who knows? Maybe Park Chan-Wook will make his version of a Hong Sang-soo movie that that he's been longing to make. So that would be cool too. So I'm just curious to see what this turns out to be. If it shoots this fall, like, can we hope for maybe a Cannes red carpet premiere in the spring? That would be something nice to look forward to, but we'll see where it goes.
Well, I like that. And yeah, he was, of course, he was working with on making a remake for The Axe and the Brigands of Rattle Creek, which was a larger project. But yeah, he's got a couple of things on the docket. He's got a couple of options, and I think we'll sign up for any of his films, including the film with yeah, if he's a Hong Sang, so I'll be down for that as well. David Robert Mitchell is looking to the future. He's now looking to re-edit a film, and MGM is their lion is roaring. Today it was announced that they have an output deal with Killer Films, which is quite encouraging for that indie production company who's now celebrating 20 plus years. And last week we had mentioned that they came on board the George Miller film, and so David is stepping up and going into the superhero mode, but it's not a Marvel franchise thing. It's not a DC thing. So what do we know?
That's about what we know. But it is David Robert Mitchell's take on superheroes, which I'm as excited and curious as anyone to see what that is. I mean, he did his version, I guess you could say, a John Carpenter movie, but a bunch of other things with It Follows. He went and did his like LA trip movie with Under the Silver Lake, which, you know, you would think with that movie he put probably every idea he ever had into it. I mean, it was a monster of a film in a lot of ways, but also, you know, with his own. I mean, it's his own thing, and he really showed a whole other side to himself there. And so I'm curious to see what his version of a superhero film is. Does this mean it's going to be something like Chronicle, Josh Trank's film, sort of a found footage, you know, high school sort of movie? Or my feeling is it'll be something that we have no idea what it will be. But the fact that he got MGM on board speaks to possibly something that's going to be a bit more wider reaching than his previous two films.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. I was thinking about his Cannes splash in 2019, or was it 2018? I forget. And how unfair it was for the expectation levels for that third film were immense, and I sort of felt that we sort of like put him in that Richard Kelly box, and yeah, I'm hoping that we don't compromise another career with and this shows or demonstrates that that expansive universe that he did create, no matter how messy it was, that there is sort of not a silver lining, but there's hope that he can bring originality to something that I've kind of lost interest until sort of like the Joker, sort of like tonally shaped or diverged from safe superhero films. So I don't know what your feelings are about the tonal shape of this project.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we don't know which direction it will go. I will say I agree with you. I did think, after finally catching up with Under the Silver Lake, that the reaction out of Cannes was very unfair. I mean, it's not a perfect film by any stretch, but there's a lot of really cool ideas. He does some really interesting things in that film. But yeah, as for the tonal shape, like, who can say it? It'll be interesting. Like Joker, was probably connected with a huge audience in a way that even Warner Brothers didn't expect. It was a massive hit and an Oscar picture contender. But I mean, then again, you have something like, this is not a good comparable, but you have something like Will Smith's Hancock, which was a different take on a superhero movie. It's a very sour, kind of cynical movie, and that one did not do as well, even with the biggest star in the world in it. So it isn't always a slam dunk when people say they want to see a different superhero movie, that when they get it, it's what they wanted and expected. So all I can say is David Robert Mitchell is marching by the beat of his own drum, and that's great.
As we are in the COVIDian days, some people are prolific, and then you have Steven Soderbergh. He floated some updates. Let's go into the Soderbergh 2020 update.
Well, he's been making the most of his quarantine time, and he has said he's knocked out 3 scripts. One of them is a sequel to his breakout Sex, Lies, and Videotape, which we'll get back to in a second. He said another one was a rewrite, and then there was another that's an adaptation of a novel.
Yeah, let's delve into the Sex, Lies sequel.
Yeah.
Let's do some revisionist history. I don't know if you think it should have won the Palme d'Or. It went up against Do the Right Thing. Mystery Train was another American indie offering in the comp. There was also Cinema Paradiso. Has Sex, Lies aged well, and does it merit? Do you want to revisit these characters?
To be honest, you know what? Here's an admission for the world. I have actually never seen Sex, Lies, and Videotape. Shocker, right?
Hey.
It's just one of those films by Soderbergh, and I've seen almost everything by him that just like, I don't know why, I just haven't. All that said, if he has an idea to bring these characters back to tell the story, why not? I mean, he showed you could, I mean, there's few storytellers in sort of mainstream Hollywood who come at projects and genres and everything from completely distinct angles and approaches. So my feeling is if he's got a way into it, he's the one who can do it. So I mean, what do you think? I mean, do you think this is a film that merits revisiting, like more than 30 years later?
To be quite honest, this week it was announced that High Flying Bird was also being looked at. He might not direct that project. I have more faith in what they can whip up together with Andre Holland. As far as this is concerned, it's not a perfect film, and I don't think it's aged well, particularly. And I don't know if I want to see a James Spader with some suspenders. I don't know where you can go with this project. It was very much a film of a very specific time and era. So I'm getting the sense I could be like a Gordon Gekko redo and not really be applicable anymore.
I guess we'll see, but yeah, I mean, to circle back to High Flying Bird, I mean, yeah, I was definitely excited to hear that there could be more to that story. I think that was a film that was really underrated and just sort of no one really paid attention to it, which I thought was a shame because I thought it was excellent. Like really well crafted. Andre Holland's always great. So yeah, I mean, listen, Soderbergh is never short of options. He's got his HBO movie coming up this year. He's got, I think he has, doesn't he have a Netflix film as well? Like, I forget what it's called.
It's called The Last Something.
Yeah. So, I mean, geez, man, like, he's always working at like 5 times the capacity of a normal human. So, in my book, we'll probably see all 3 scripts in production at some point.
He's a machine. Frances O'Connor is directing Emily. What do you have to say about that?
So yeah, she's directing a film about Emily Brontë, the writer of Wuthering Heights. I think the difference here, I mean, Little Women, I suppose, is a good comparison in the sense that yeah, it's about a female author, but it also showed how to bring that time period, that kind of story, and contemporize it, at least in terms of approach and feeling. So sure, there was an opportunity here to explore the life of Emily Brontë in a way that could connect with a large audience and maybe lift it out of the sort of BBC Sunday afternoon treatment, which a lot of these kind of stories wind up getting. And Frances O'Connor, for what will be incredibly her directorial debut, which is pretty cool, has got a pretty interesting cast lined up. Maybe you can dive into that a bit.
So they named the quartet of figures that'll play the sisters, the family, and I think the boyfriend in the scenario, I think. So you have Emma Mackey, who's a newish actress, and she's got a couple projects in the lined up. We have Joel Alwyn, who is part of the cast for The Favorite. Fiona Whitehead, who's the more popular of the four figures, I would say, and Emily Besham, who gave an outstanding performance in Little Joe, which was at the Cannes Film Festival last year, and she won the Best Actress Award there. So a rather youngish cast, sort of like the stars are aligned for this young cast, and so Emma McKee, is going to be taking on the role of Emily.
Yeah, and again, like, we don't know how, it's always early days with these kind of projects, but it's certainly going to be an attractive one in the market, I would say. And the Brontes, I mean, whether it's I don't know how many films about the writers individually, but the writers specifically there have been, but obviously their books have spurned multiple adaptations. So something that looks at their lives provides another point of entry, another point of interest for this sort of territory that's been explored pretty frequently.
Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights were both recently done by some female auteurs. So yeah, we're gonna. I'm getting a little woman feeling for this. So the project is going into production. The first quarter of 2021, targeting a 2022 release. Of course, that all comes with a little asterisks. It's not a given, but it's rather nice to see somebody who's had a really long career path, and she's touched Jane Austen and Mansfield Park, and went sci-fi with the AI, artificial intelligence, that being one of her bigger roles. But it's nice to see an actress decide at this junction to say, hey, I'm going to jump in the director's chair and see how that feels like. And that's that for
that's a good note to end on.
Week 7. Hi, I'm Eric Lavallée. I'm editor-in-chief and site owner for IONCINEMA.com, and this is
Kevin Jagernauth, contributing writer for the playlist.
And together we are IndieSponge.